I'd like to share a poem by Maya Angelou called Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. So I have to admit, preparing for this service was a little difficult. You see, I recently moved from my nice, cozy, really horribly expensive apartment to a less nice, less cozy, less expensive one. Now, normally I would have all my books unpacked by this point. Like, it's usually the first thing I unpack. But I hurt my foot at work shortly after my move and have been unable to exert what I needed to do to move boxes around the cats, which, as you know, is really tricky, and unpack. Now, I'm neurodivergent, which means basically that my neurotype is not considered typical. In this case, I have ADHD. So normally I would just tap my good foot impatiently. I'd watch shows on my streaming services. In this instance, I rewatched The Good Place, which I love, and I would get distracted by the task of being a really good patient. I'm an excellent patient. But my favorite poetry books and my hymnals and my translated Rumi were all packed up, and I had this sermon to write, and I had a service to prepare. So this made me a little antsy. So I did what any good librarian would do when her back is up against the wall. I went to the internet. I accessed web resources like poets.org. I used the UUA's worship web. I used other churches' lists of hymnals and hymns. And some of the things they say about hymns is really kind of catty. They're like, this one's strange. We don't like this one. It was very weird. So I thought also a lot about the reason that I had to move. For those of you who haven't had to rent an apartment recently, one's rent is ideally not to exceed 1/3 of one's gross income. The word gross is key. In fact, many landlords and rental companies won't even approve your application unless you meet this criteria. When I had first moved in back in 2021, I met the criteria. Then my rent was raised in 2022, as one does, and I found it tougher to make my monthly rent payments, to the point where, due to the awkward timing of when they would take the money out of my account, there were a couple of times when I was hit with non-sufficient fund warnings. Imagine paying so much for your rent that paying for Netflix causes you to be overdrawn. Yeah. As a result, the rental company refused to allow me to pay via electronic means and would only accept money orders or cashier checks. And I promise the story has a point. I had no problem purchasing money orders the first time I had to pay my rent in this fashion. I simply just went to Walmart, as one does. But the next time proved to be a little problematic. I went to Walmart and asked the customer service counter people if I could purchase some money orders, same as I did the last time. "Our system is down," said the woman behind the counter tonelessly. I guess that explained the lack of lines at the registers. "Oh, do you know when it'll be back up?" I said. "No," she said, not offering any other information. "Okay, then I'll just come back later," I said chirpily. I went to my car. I sat there playing Words with Friends, waiting for the exodus of people to stop leaving the store and to actually go into the store and stay. Then I went back inside and asked, "Is your money order system still down?" "Yes." "Oh, okay, thanks," I said, and then I went home vowing to return the next day. Upon my return to Walmart, I noted that the same woman was behind the counter. "Buck up, Ayanna, she's only one person," I told myself. "Can I help you?" she said. "Yes, I'd like to buy some money orders, please." I hoped that the please would sort of warm her up a little bit. "Our system is down," she said. "Your whole system?" I said. I saw people shopping and standing in line and buying stuff, so this seemed doubtful. Her brow wrinkled slightly. "No, just the money order system." Do you know how long it'll be down?" "No." "Okay, thank you." I said it with less pep than usual. Why was the money order system still down? As I got out of line, I saw her call forward a man, a white man, who was holding a receipt the same yellow as the Western Union logo. Western Union was the system that was used to create the money orders. I had an idea. I went to my car, looked at the phone number of the Walmart, and called their system. "Hello?" "Well, hi there," I drawled, disguising my voice in a genteel southern accent. "Is it possible to purchase money orders at your store?" "Why, yes, ma'am, it is," replied the woman on the other end of the line. "That is so good to hear. I tried yesterday, and your system wasn't working. Is it working today?" "Yes, ma'am, it is. No problems at all today." My heart fell into my stomach. I did my best to keep up the charade. "Well, thank you for that information. Bye now." Trying not to cry, I called my mother up, who kindly looked up the address and phone number of a Walmart neighborhood store that was not in Simi Valley. I called them up using my regular voice this time, and they told me that they issue money orders and that their system was working perfectly. So I drove out to Newbury Park, and the nice young person behind the counter gave me a smile as I purchased my money orders. Now, this instance is just one of many assaults to my personhood that I experience on a regular basis. When I wrote about this incident on my Facebook, a friend of mine said that I should complain to the manager. What he failed to understand was that I, as a short black woman, stood a higher chance of being escorted out of the store by either the manager or the police than he did as a tall white man. Instead, I did what I usually did. I continued to exist. I went about my life, and I thanked the fates when I no longer was beholden to that particular apartment rental company. As a Black woman, I exist at the intersection of racism and sexism and am subject to both forms of oppression. In 1962, Malcolm X said, "The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman." Things haven't changed much in the past few years, I hate to say. Black women are often expected to be strong in the face of, well, everything. The strong Black woman is an established stereotype. Admittedly, part of this is due to the fact that we have witnessed our mothers and grandmothers take on and take care of more than any rational human being should have to deal with: discrimination, single parenting, housing insecurities, struggles for equal education and pay, just to name a few. So we younger women have felt that we needed to match those standards. But nowadays, Black women are finally admitting that we are tired. It is exhausting to have to fight all the time. And as tired human beings, we don't have the strength or the will to do it anymore. In short, we need a break. So we exist. We go on living. We try to be polite when our white friends suggest that we protest or complain or write a letter or do any number of things. And then we go home, crawl into our pajamas, and play words with friends until we go to bed at 9 p.m. Black women are not the only ones who are oppressed and discriminated against. So many people in our society are discriminated against here in the United States. They are dealt a raw deal because they are different. Indigenous people and other people of color, dark-skinned people, women in general, queer, trans, and non-binary folk, those who identify as asexual, the disabled, neurodivergent people, the aged, folks from other countries, non-native English speakers, first-generation college grads, non-Christians, the mentally ill, fat people, the poor, the unhoused, and the list goes on. So many people in this country do not fit into what our country defines as normal. Straight, cisgender, able-bodied, white, Christian, English-speaking men of a certain age and weight and class in society. Society in the United States caters to this definition of the norm. These gentlemen are seen as the perfect demographic and are what we are supposed to envision when we think of the word people. There is no need to use modifiers when discussing this group of people because they are the norm. They are the subject of experiments which yield the standards of care in the medical field. They are the people who are catered to by the film and television industries. They are everyone's main character in everyone's imagining of their lives. In our society, being a cis white male grants you certain benefits in life, like great health care, the ability to build and access generational wealth, and the ability to command people's attention. When you're not normal, you're treated differently, or hated, or ignored. Some normal people wish you didn't exist, or that you were never born, or that you could be cured, or prayed away. If you're lucky, you might be tolerated. For example, women of great beauty, if they are light-skinned or don't have overly ethnic features, are prized as arm candy. But if you possess multiple undesirable characteristics, making you the picture of intersectionality, it seems to be less likely that you will be tolerated. In fact, you will be oppressed. Continuing to exist is one of the most powerful forms of resistance that I can imagine in my way of thinking. Why do I think this? Because existing is essentially everyday resistance. We don't have to engage in constant acts of rebellion such as marches and protests in order to enact revolution. In fact, I would even argue that sometimes what we need is a good nap. Now, let me explain. The Nap Ministry, which is an actual real organization, was created in 2016 by Tricia Hershey, who's a theologian and performance artist. She wanted to encourage people to embrace the liberating power of naps and ditch the toxic ethos of grind culture. Now, grind culture, which is also known as hustle culture, refers to the societal notion that we must exert ourselves to the extreme in order to be considered successful. That is, putting forth 110% all the time. Grind culture stems from internalized capitalism, which is defined as this idea that our self-worth is directly linked to our productivity. Basically, we are only worthwhile if we are contributing all we can to capitalism. Grind culture is also an extension of white supremacy culture, as defined by Tima Okun, which we must remind ourselves is systemic. It's the air we breathe. It's nothing that we are doing. Grind culture embraces two aspects of white supremacy culture: urgency and quantity over quality. So, through existing, we are resisting. Through existing, we are resisting this whole notion of hustle and grind culture. Now, I am often one of the few Black people in a situation or in an environment, such as living in Ventura County, which is 1% Black, or at my job, where librarians make up maybe 5%, or here. So I cannot summon a group to help me protest a situation or an organization, or to resist a particular microaggression flung at me by a careless person, because in most instances, it just wouldn't make sense. So let me give you an example. I wasn't here at church last weekend because I was an adult advisor for the overnight youth con that occurred during the Pacific Southwest Service Area District Assembly in San Luis Obispo. So I was up at SLO. I have to admit, I was a little nervous being at SLO because the last time I was there was for a library meeting, and I was kept from entering the public library because I looked like a wet and rained upon unhoused person with tons of bags of books. However, while the attendees of this conference were overwhelmingly white, as is the tendency with UU congregations, they were also very pleasant and very nice people. But then it happened. On Saturday, I was chatting with the only other Black person there, who happened to be one of the presenters. She joked that if her daughter had been there, we could form a Black caucus. And her partner was with us, and he happened to be white. Then someone swooped in and exclaimed, "I must take a picture of you three. I want him," pointing to her partner, "in the middle so that you make an Oreo." Yeah, I almost gasped. Did they know that the term Oreo is a derogatory term used to describe Black folks who are Black on the outside but white on the inside? No. I managed a weak laugh, and we arranged ourselves like a nice little Oreo. Then, once the white person wandered off, I commented nonchalantly, "You know, I was once called an Oreo when I was growing up." "Me too," replied the other woman. "Here's the Oreos." I raised my can of seltzer water in a toast, and she clinked my can with her glass of red wine. See, most of the time, this is all we can do. We make jokes, we smile, we carry on. An afternoon reception, even one hosted by Unitarian Universalists, does not present the ideal time or place to upbraid someone about a microaggression. And what would be the chances she would earnestly learn anything from whatever I had to say to her? And there was no use in complaining about this person to the organizers because they were one of the organizers. So I existed. And later on, I took a nap. And then I woke up in a much better frame of mind. not so exhausted, and the burning of my soul extinguished. This sermon is not intended to discourage you from taking up the good fight, from being an ally in whatever battles you see unfolding or otherwise taking place. Rather, its intent is to encourage you to consider alternate forms of resistance. Being in a constant state of fight or flight is unhealthy, regardless of who you are. Sometimes just persisting on existing is what's called for. And sometimes you need to nap. Blessed be.